Hey, what's up guys, it's NickTew, and today I want to talk about a weapon perk that I don't think gets nearly enough credit and is now more relevant and better than it ever has been, and will potentially get even better as time goes on with the other subclasses being reworked and us getting access to Arc and Solar 3.0. In this video, I'll of course talk about the perk itself, go over the best weapons that you guys can use it on, some builds to best take advantage of it, and also the main benefit, which is it opens your weapon options up a ton, so you can use some weapons that you otherwise felt like you couldn't, which is honestly my favorite part. Being able to use a ton of different options in the special slot as well as some exotics is a lot of fun. Sorry for being vague and ambiguous at this point, but I gotta keep you guys interested somehow. But real quick before we get into it, I want to give a huge thanks to today's sponsor, which helps enable me to continue to create content for a living, and that sponsor is Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends, if you somehow haven't already heard of it, is an impressively high-quality action RPG game that's available on both mobile and PC, and has millions of players and an insane amount of content to do, ranging from campaign battles, PvP, dungeons, huge boss fights, and tons more. And with over 600 champions and hundreds of artifacts to collect, you'll never run out of things to do in Raid. If you're interested, make sure to check out the link in the description to hop into Raid today. Something that's super unique about Raid is that it actually has a fully comprehensive campaign that has a ton of story and lore built into it, where you can learn about each of the factions, specifically the orcs, and you can unlock some extremely cool looking champions in the process. Personally, my favorite orc champion is this dude, because I mean, just look at these weapons, they're absolutely crazy. But honestly, my favorite thing about the game is collecting a bunch of new and interesting champions and being able to fully customize them and seeing how they interact with my other champions. Each champion will always have its own unique ability, which often interacts very well with another champion, so the options are truly limitless here. There's always ways to improve your characters and your builds, and I have a ton of fun upgrading my guys and setting up new and interesting builds. I highly recommend that you guys hop into the game and get started collecting some super strong champions, and luckily there's never been a better time to jump into Raid, because this month, if you use my link in the description or my QR code and you're a new player, you'll get a free starter pack worth nearly $30 that includes not only a free champion, but also 200,000 silver, an XP boost, an energy refill, and an ancient shard so that you can summon even more champions as soon as you get into the game. You can also find some extra rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days. Make sure to check out the link in the description, and a huge thanks to Raid for sponsoring this video. Alright, so let's get right into it. As I'm sure many of you guys know, volatile rounds is like absolutely ridiculous right now. Slap on literally any void weapon of your choosing, spawn some wells, and you'll basically just destroy everything in your path. On something like the funnel web, having access to volatile rounds by itself is nearly a 60% damage increase for the gun, flat out, as well as giving it an insane amount of AoE capability. On top of that, if you're playing Void, which most people are, you'll also get Font of Might, so it's pretty much a no-brainer to use a Void weapon right now. Honestly, it feels really painful whenever you take one off and you try something else, because in comparison, it's just so much weaker, even if you have really well-rolled primary legendary weapons. While I do absolutely love using my funnel web, the main issue that I have with it being so predominant is that it heavily restricts what you're able to use. It's so strong that it nearly feels mandatory, so no matter what I'm doing, my energy slot always feels like it's taken up, which honestly makes me a little sad because a ton of my favorite weapons are in the energy slot. Well, that's where the perk Osmosis comes in. This perk basically allows you to turn your kinetic weapon into a void weapon simply by just throwing a grenade, and now it can take advantage of both Volatile Flow and Font of Might, so you can use your favorite weapons in the special slot. The only issue that I really have with Osmosis is that there's very few weapons that it rolls on, which is why I don't think that many people use it, but I'll show you guys a list of all the weapons that it does roll on, tell you guys which I think are best, where you can get them, and also talk about some builds to best utilize the perk. Alright, so let's just get into it. I first really want to quickly preface anybody that is going to comment, oh, I use Osmosis, you know, you didn't come up with this. Obviously, I didn't come up with using the perk Osmosis. It's just on very few weapons, and I don't really see all that many people using it, so I kind of just wanted to make this video to share all that information with you guys. But also, the main reason is that, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of weapons that I like using in my special slot that I literally just haven't been able to use because I've just been using my funnel web the whole time. So I want to mention some of those weapon options super quickly just to give you guys an idea of what you can actually be taking advantage of, which is kind of the main benefit of doing this, and then I'll show you guys some Osmosis weapons that are extremely good. So first off, the new grenade launcher from the Raid. I mean, this thing is insane. I'm sure you guys have seen videos on it. It can get chain reaction, very, very good. Fusions are still pretty good even without particle deconstruction. Null Composure particularly good because Reservoir Burst is really good for AoE, also does some extra damage when you pull it out and just shoot one guy. You can also take advantage of volatile rounds and Font of Might with this thing. Same thing with Telesto, but I do think Null Composure is just a little bit better than Telesto, but you can get mad at me for that if you want. Cartesian Coordinate, if you really like using this. For some reason, I don't have my lead from gold roll. I don't know where it is, but it doesn't matter. Dead Messenger, if you like using this thing, it's void. Waveframes are pretty fun, and you can swap it for match game. This thing that I like to call the Thug U, this thing's actually pretty good. You can get, like I have here, 4 times the Charm Focus Fury. I was surprised that this thing is actually as good as it is, and pairing this with a Osmosis Primary is certainly a great setup. Something like Truth Teller, pretty good. Explosive Personality, also a Waveframe. Oh, this isn't the right one. I have one that is, this is also a good roll, but I happen to have one that is Stats for All, 1 for All, which is really, really good. And then, of course, something like Deafening Whisper. There's a ton of other options. I didn't even throw on a Glaive here, but if you're playing Hunter with, like, Suppressing Glaive, for example, this is probably the most beneficial for those people, actually, because you feel like you're sacrificing a lot by throwing that Glaive in that slot. So then you can have that as well as a really good Void Add Clear weapon. But what's also great about this is that you can free up your exotic slot, right? I can have an Osmosis Primary, use like my Grenade Launcher, for example, and then if I want to, if I'm just doing normal content, I can use Tractor Cannon to debuff stuff for myself, or I can run around with something like Parasite and Gallahorn without feeling like it completely butchers the rest of my setup. Of course, feel free to use whatever you want, but I wanted to cover those. So I only have 3 Osmosis weapons. I'm going to show you guys the full list of them. The only one I'm going to talk about right here is Traveler's Chosen. This is the only exotic that has it, so pretty much everybody has access to this right now, and the catalyst is pretty easy to get as well. So pretty much what this does is it has built-in Osmosis, and then the main perk is Gathering Light, where whenever you get a kill with this weapon, it's going to give you a stack of Gathering Light, and then each stack is going to increase the handling, weapon reload speed, and the target acquisition of the weapon. Obviously, this thing is a sidearm, which is not like the best weapon archetype in the game, but what's cool is that Gathering Light is pretty much just Wellspring on crack. You can save it, use it whenever you want, and it pairs particularly well with Osmosis. You don't even have to have like a good build. I think this thing is pretty good for budget builds because Gathering Light will literally just give you a full grenade, full melee, full class ability charge if you're at 10, and if you don't need a full charge, you can consume it prior to getting 10 stacks. So overall, this thing is pretty good, and it's an exotic, so it has that extra 40% damage. The only Osmosis weapons that I personally own are Scathelock and Fatebringer, but I'm going to show you guys a ton of options that you can choose from and which ones I think are the best. So if you guys don't already know, LightGG has this God Roll Finder. The UI is not the best thing ever. I'll leave a link to this in the description, but basically I have it filtered to show every single weapon in the game that has Osmosis. Obviously, there's only 23, which kind of sucks and is kind of the main reason that not that many people are really using this, because most people might not even have a weapon with Osmosis in their vault, but there's actually some pretty good options here. So the main option that I think is the best is Escape Velocity. The reason for this is SMGs are just the best weapon archetype in the game for PvE, unless you're doing like GMs or something. SMGs are just extremely good, and they also take advantage the most of Volatile Flow because of their high RPM, meaning that they're going to proc the internal cooldown of Volatile Flow as much as possible. You can also get some really good rolls on this thing. This thing is a 900 RPM, so and it feels and looks pretty much exactly the same as Multimach, so if you've used that, you know. You can get something like the Model 6 Loop for range, Accurized rounds, or Flared Magwell is really, really good. And then you can get something like Overflow Threat Detector, and then you can get, of course, Osmosis. I'm not entirely sure how often this thing drops. I did Legendaries of Eternity, and a friend actually got this to drop. I don't think that it's out of the pool at all, but I haven't seen it drop normally. It may only be available in stuff like Gambit or Dares of Eternity. If you guys happen to have gotten any drops recently, please feel free to leave it down in the comments, because this is what I want the absolute most, and if I had this the whole time, I don't think I would take it off. Alternatively, there's a ton of options up here. I think the second best option is going to be Fatebringer. The reason being is that for Fatebringer, it's actually going to roll in the left slot, which I think is the only gun in the entire game that does that. And Fatebringer also is a really good gun and has some very good rolls on it. So you get something like Flared Magwell, Osmosis, and then you can get Firefly, Frenzy, Kill Clip, or Adrenaline Junkie. Or Eye of the Storm if you want survivability. Like, literally every single one of these perks, other than Opening Shot, which is the roll that I have, every single one of these perks is extremely good, so I'd highly recommend going and getting one of these. You can also get one that's Adept, which is a main benefit to this. I think a lot of people will probably have one of these in their vault, because when you get an Adept Fatebringer, it's going to roll with like 2 perk options, so it's very likely that you have one of these. I know a lot of you guys are probably going to be like, oh, I don't want to get rid of Explosive Payload, but Volatile Flow is Explosive Payload, but like 5 times better. Like, it's actually crazy, so definitely would take a look out for this one, and you could very easily go and farm it. Some other options, I don't want to go over every single one, but the rest of them I'm just going to go over ones that I know that you can easily obtain. If you guys are interested in farming any of these other specific ones, I'm sure that the majority of them are still obtainable, and there's some pretty good options here. I would just click the link down in the description so you guys can check the roles yourself. I'm just going to cover these last 4 here. So Servant Leader, this thing's pretty interesting because it's one of the only rapid fire frame scout rifles in the game, and it has a ton of perk options. I don't really know where this thing drops, but I know that it does still drop because I just got one recently. But this thing has an insane amount of good rolls: Outlaw, Rapid Hit, 4 times a Charm, Subsistence. That's probably the only ones that you'd want, and then pair that with Osmosis, and obviously that would be pretty good. And the extra RPM means that you can benefit a lot from a volatile flow here, so this thing would probably be a fantastic pickup. And then for another hand cannon option, a lot of people really love Judgment. The main reason for this is that you can get Demolitionist paired with Osmosis, which is really, really good, and that's probably the only other perk that you want. And of course you get something like Flared Magwell. Additionally, you could get Last Breath. Both of these can come from Prophecy, by the way, so a really great thing to do is to go farm Prophecy, because you can get both of these weapons there, and they can both roll Demolitionist, Osmosis, which is like an amazing combination. Alternatively, something like Subsistence Osmosis would be pretty good, and Scathelock is similar to the Last Breath. They're both 600 RPM, and they don't feel all too different. Scathelock I don't think is as good, but it's very likely that you guys have one of these because they dropped like crazy last season, and you can get something like Flared Magwell, Subsistence, Osmosis, which is a really good roll as well. That's pretty much the only good roll that it has. Surplus isn't all that bad, but ideally you want to be like tossing your grenade out a lot. So those are going to be your best bets in terms of which weapons you want to actually get Osmosis on. In terms of how to benefit the most from Osmosis, I bet there's already a lot of people that have commented down below, I don't like using Osmosis because I have to throw my grenade all the time, and if I swap weapons it's going to go away. Well, it's actually not that big of a deal. Every single character right now has a very easy way to get grenades back extremely quickly, especially if you want to use something like Traveler's Chosen. But I mean, look at my Warlock stats right now, like Controverse Hold, Verity's Brow, Nezaric's Sin. On Hunter and Titan you can get Devour. Like, I've made builds for all these characters where you can just get your grenade back extremely quickly. I did say that I'd talk about builds here, but honestly I've already made videos on them, and I don't really know what to say other than throw on the Devour Fragment, throw on an ability regeneration exotic like Verity's Brow, Nezaric's Sin, or Heart of Inmost Light, or Frosty's. Get as much discipline as possible, get some well mod spawning, and you shouldn't really have any problems with being able to spam your grenade out. If you are having even more problems, I'd recommend putting on like Axion Bolt or something, because that will reduce the grenade cooldown. But otherwise, if you want to use Vortex still, that's perfectly fine, and you should have more than enough grenades to be able to perfectly take advantage of Osmosis while still being able to use your other weapons, which are extremely strong. That's pretty much it for the video though. If you guys have any recommendations for some other weapons that I maybe didn't mention, or some combinations that you guys think are particularly good, please feel free to leave it down in the comments. If you happen to know a way to farm the escape velocity, I will be your best friend and I'll give you a big kiss. If you can let me know that in the comments as well, that would be greatly appreciated because I really, really want that gun. But otherwise, that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to drop a like. Helps me out a ton. And subscribe for videos similar to this one. I'm also going to be making a video on the Warlock build that you guys see on screen. This build's actually insane, by the way. So feel free to subscribe if you want to see that. But yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you guys.